Ever since I was a kid, I had this one crazy dream. While other kids wanted to be astronauts or doctors, I wanted to create video games. I would spend hours drawing characters, mapping out worlds on graph paper, and writing down elaborate storylines. It was my whole world. I'd try to show my parents, my eyes shining with excitement, and say, "Look, this is the main character, and this is the magic sword he finds." They'd usually just glance at it, smile a little, and say something like, "That's nice, honey, but have you finished your math homework?" As I got older, their polite disinterest turned into active discouragement. "Video games? That's not a real job," my dad would say, shaking his head. "You're so smart. You should be a lawyer or an engineer. Something stable. Something respectable." My mom was a bit softer, but her message was the same. "We just worry about you," she'd say. "We want you to have a good future, a secure life. Playing games all day won't pay the bills." High school was the worst. Parent-teacher conferences were a nightmare. My art and computer science teachers would rave about my potential, my creativity, my passion. But my parents would only focus on the subjects they deemed important. "His grades in physics need to improve," my dad would insist, completely ignoring my perfect score on a coding project. It felt like they were deliberately blind to the one thing that made me feel alive. The arguments became more frequent. "You're wasting your talent," they'd yell. "You're throwing your life away on childish fantasies." Every word was a little cut, chipping away at my confidence. It got to the point where I stopped showing them my work. My dream became a secret, something I pursued late at night in my room when everyone else was asleep. The worlds I built on my computer screen were my only escape, the only place where I felt understood and valued. When it came time for college applications, the real battle began. They had a list of universities picked out for me, all with prestigious engineering programs. I didn't want any of them. I wanted to go to a school known for its game design program. When I told them, the house exploded. "Absolutely not. We are not paying for you to go learn how to play games." My dad's voice boomed. It was one of the biggest fights we'd ever had. They saw it as the ultimate act of defiance, of disrespect. I saw it as fighting for my life, for my very soul. In the end, I had to compromise. I enrolled in a traditional university for computer science, but I secretly loaded my schedule with every relevant elective I could find: graphic design, creative writing, animation. I told my parents I was building a solid foundation in programming, which was technically true. What I didn't tell them was that I was using that foundation to build the portfolio of my dreams. I joined online forums, collaborated with other aspiring developers, and spent every spare moment honing my craft. I was living a double life. After graduation, the pressure mounted. "So, have you applied to Google, Microsoft?" they'd ask at dinner. I had. I'd even gotten a few offers for standard software engineering roles. But my heart wasn't in it. Instead, I took a huge risk. I turned down those stable, high-paying jobs and took a low-paying internship at a small, indie game studio. When I told my parents, they were beyond disappointed. They were furious. "After all we've done for you, after all that expensive education, you choose this? To barely make rent? We wash our hands of this. You're on your own." Those words hurt more than anything. They cut ties. For the next few years, communication was strained, limited to awkward holiday phone calls. Those years were tough. I was broke. I lived on instant noodles and shared a tiny apartment with 3 other people. There were many times I almost gave up, times I thought my parents were right. The industry is incredibly competitive. I faced rejection after rejection. But every time I was about to quit, I'd remember that feeling of pure joy I got from creating something from nothing. That passion was the fuel that kept me going. Slowly, things started to change. The small studio I worked for released a game that became a surprise hit. It wasn't a blockbuster, but it got us noticed. I started to build a name for myself. I moved from intern to junior designer, then to lead designer. I poured everything I had into my work. My next project was my baby, a game based on some of the very ideas I had sketched out as a kid. I led a small, passionate team, and we worked tirelessly. The launch day for that game was the most terrifying day of my life. But then the reviews started coming in. And they were glowing. Players loved it. It won awards. It became a massive commercial success, far beyond our wildest dreams. Suddenly, I wasn't the broke kid living on noodles anymore. I had made it. I had proven them all wrong. One evening, about a year after my game's release, I got a call. It was my mom. Her voice was trembling. My dad had been laid off from the engineering firm he'd worked at for 30 years. They were downsizing, and his position was eliminated. He was in his late 50s, and finding a new job at that level was nearly impossible. They had a mortgage, car payments, and my dad's pension wasn't nearly enough. They were in serious financial trouble. They were at risk of losing their house, the very house I grew up in. My mom, through tears, asked if I could help. She hated asking. I could hear the shame in her voice. The irony was staggering. The childish fantasy they had mocked for years was now their only hope. The unstable career was the only thing that could provide them with security. I didn't hesitate. Of course I would help. I drove to their house the next day. It was the first time I'd been back in years. It was so strange. My dad, who had always been this towering, confident figure, looked smaller, defeated. We sat at the kitchen table, the same table where he had once told me I was wasting my life. It was incredibly awkward. They couldn't even look me in the eye. Finally, I broke the silence. I told them I would pay off their mortgage. All of it, and I would set up a monthly fund to cover their living expenses so they wouldn't have to worry. My mom just started sobbing. My dad just sat there, staring at the table, completely silent. After a long moment, he looked up at me, and for the first time I saw something in his eyes I'd never seen before. Respect. He cleared his throat. I was wrong, he stammered. I'm sorry. We're so proud of you. It was all he could manage, but it was everything I had ever wanted to hear. It wasn't about the money. It was about them finally seeing me, truly seeing me for who I was. In that moment, all the years of anger and resentment just melted away. They were my parents. They had made mistakes, but they did it because they loved me and were scared for me, even if they showed it in a completely wrong way. My success didn't feel complete until I could share it with them, until it could bring them peace. Life is strange. The very dream my parents tried to crush ended up being their safety net. It taught me that you have to believe in yourself, even when no one else does. Your passion, your unique talent, that thing that makes you feel alive? That's not a distraction. That is your path. It might be hard, it might be lonely, but the reward of living a life that is authentically yours is worth every single struggle. And sometimes it can even bring your whole world back together. Thank you so much for listening to my story. If you've ever had someone doubt your dreams, I hope this gives you a little bit of strength to keep going. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video if it resonated with you. See you in the next one.